Hello, and welcome to the Project Elected podcast. Project Elect is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose goal is pretty simple. We want to get more Latter-day Saint women involved in public service. On this podcast, we interview amazing Latter-day Saint women who are involved in public service. Hi, my name is Audrey Perry-Martin. I'm the founder of Project Elect and the host of this podcast. I am here today with Gretchen Rydin. She is on the Littleton, Colorado City Council, and she is running for the state house in this upcoming election. And she just told me that today is actually her primary election. So we appreciate her taking time to talk to us on primary election day. So Gretchen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is so fun. And I love that you are gathering these stories and creating a platform to share. I think it'll be so useful to so many women, and not only women, but everybody in our faith, especially, to get excited and realize it actually is not that hard to run for office. It really isn't.
That's good to hear you say that, since you definitely know. And thank you. I love talking to all these incredible women. It's such a treat for me. I would love to hear about you and what your background is, what led you to run for public office in the first place.
I have a lot of different identities. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I also have my license in addiction counseling. I am an advocate. I'm a musician. I am a Relief Society teacher. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm an elected official. I'm on the city council in Littleton, which has been amazing. Working at the local level is something else. I do have a background in politics. I worked on Barack Obama's campaign, his first presidential campaign. And I think that was the launching point to help me really get excited about, hey, running for office really is our civic responsibility. Like, it's up to the citizens to take ownership of their government, and we have a role to play. We're not just bystanders. But I think what really got me, I took sort of a circuitous route. I always thought I would then pursue policy or something like that and be like one of those high-powered people, whether it would be a lawyer or a doctor or something in that space. And I spent a considerable amount of time in Washington, D.C. So I lived there for almost 10 years. And when I moved there, I was just being reactivated in my own faith, having dealt with my own faith crisis. And I moved to D.C. I was 24 years old, I believe. Again, trying to reactivate. And I was like, all right, I'm going to commit like full-hearted to this. I had been a little bit stepped away from our church for several years, but I was like ready to be converted. When you're that age, you're put into a young single adult ward, which was very different. I went to Brigham Young University, so I wasn't like not used to being in a young single adult ward, but I wasn't used to being one where everybody was working professionals. Yeah, there were some people who were going to school, but for the most part, it was a group of very smart, very educated and passionate people wanting to make a difference into their country, or they were there because they were excited about certain nonprofits they were working with. But there was just, and DC itself is just a very special place. And there's a special group of members over there. And so that was very instrumental, I think, in shaping what I'm doing now. And when you're young, that's when you have some leadership opportunities, especially in our faith. You're thrust in and they say, run with it. And I was in a mind space where I was going to run with it. And because of that, I just got being tapped in more and more leadership roles, which really helped to grow my skill set to do the community work that I'm doing now. And I was loving it. I loved doing a lot of community organizing within our faith. Back in DC, we were doing a lot of interfaith work, which was super exciting. I loved getting to be a representative for our faith with other faith communities and just seeing the commonalities, which again allowed me to see beyond partisanness. Because when you're with another faith, you maybe believe very different things, but there are so many similarities. And so it was finding common ground through that avenue. And the community outreach stuff was just really fun. And again, just getting to be an ambassador for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was fantastic. Again, I wasn't really into the politics side of things, although in DC, everything is politics. But I really I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, what was going to be my career trajectory. And again, I thought it was going to be in the policy space. And so I was pursuing those things and looking at graduate programs that honored that, since DC is famous for that. As part of that gung-ho reactivation, I really wanted to commit to every calling I had. So back then it was visiting teaching. Now we call it ministering. When I was younger, I always thought it was stupid. But I was like, nope, I'm going to commit to it fully. And so I was assigned 2 lovely women and just got to know them individually and serve them individually. And that was a launching point for my career in social work. because I realized, oh my goodness, I really love this. I love getting to meet individual needs. And that was something that was missing for me in the policy space. And so that really helped me get my master's, figure out I'm going to get my master's in social work. And then I moved from that more policy side and advocacy side into more clinical work, doing one-on-one work. And now I do a lot of group therapy and individual therapy. I'll do some couples therapy at a community mental health center, and it's incredibly rewarding. I moved out to Colorado after I graduated. I got my master's at Howard University in DC, and I have family out here. And so it just made sense to move. And I was shifting trajectories anyway and going to be focused exclusively on clinical one-on-one stuff. And then COVID hit, and I really felt I wasn't as connected to my community as I was when I was in Washington, D.C. I had family here, which was fantastic and such a blessing, I think, to have at least somebody, because I didn't have that on the East Coast. But as COVID was coming to an end, I'm like, okay, it's time to reconnect with the community and start building some of those bridges and those connections again. So I looked at applying to be on a board and commission, which a lot of local cities have and townships have, where you can just be like a citizen, give citizen input to the council. And I applied to be on that board. They did not accept me. And I was like, what? Why aren't you accepting me? I'm awesome. I'm giving my free time. So I started talking to some other people who were in the Littleton City Council, and they said, you should just consider running yourself. And so I hadn't thought of that. And just one conversation led to the next conversation, and they introduced me to more people. And I think I spent 2 weeks thinking about it, praying about it, talking to family members about it, and just decided to go for it. And I figured it was a test of faith, and it was very rewarding. In the last 3 years, I've been on council now. I've learned a ton. And then thinking through our limitations of what you can do to support the things I care about, mental health, addiction, housing, small business. There's only so much you can do really at that very local level. And so it made sense when the legislator who was over my district wasn't seeking reelection. So he asked if I would be interested. And it was another like, hey, this isn't in my plan. I still have another year left on my term. Again, prayed about it, talked to some people about it, and figured like it would be another test of faith to keep moving up into a different direction, and I'll have a different impact. So that's why I'm running, and how I'm running for House District 38 in Colorado.
Okay. And you mentioned today is your primary, but you don't seem very stressed. Why is that?
No, I don't have an opponent for the primary. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a somewhat purple district. So I didn't have a primary, but I do have a general election opponent. My campaign's been going for a couple months now, and it's in full gear. And it's certainly at the beginning of the campaigns, it's just a lot of fundraising. And I'm blessed in that I already have run a campaign before. I've been run for city council, and a lot of the city council jurisdiction is in the House district that I'm running in. So I've knocked on a lot of doors already from that race. And so not too many people won't be too surprised to see me again when I start knocking on their door.
How is it running the second time? Compare the first time you ran to the second time you ran, because it sounds like you got in the first time not really planning for it long term, but just thinking, okay, I'm going to run. And then now you are more experienced politician. So compare those two. Tell me what are the differences?
Oh, I hate being called a politician. I have such a knee-jerk reaction to that.
I totally get that.
I'm not used to it. I don't think of myself that way. I think of myself just as a public servant, who just wants to make a difference in our community. And yes, I am a politician.
You can't even say it. I love it.
I think it's not as scary because I've done the numbers. I've worked with some of the contact management systems. I've had the fundraisers. I've talked to the people. I've had to put together a website, done some of the administrative and operational things, which frankly, that's the infrastructure of your campaign, which I think can be the most daunting. For me, the big surprise here has just been the scope. So when you're a legislator, yes, you're there to represent your district, but you also have to be thinking about the entire state of Colorado. And that really is something I have not had to grapple with, because when I'm acting as a city council member, I'm really thinking about my city. And yeah, I'll do some regional work, but I'm thinking of the city of Littleton as a partner in that region. So it's a little different thinking, hey, I have to operate of what's best for all of Colorado. And there's very different communities and different demographics than what I'm representing. So conceptually, I think wrapping my head around that. And then just the scope. This race is, I probably have to raise 15 times what I raised, or at least 10 times what I raised for my city council race. And that can be really daunting.
Fundraising is hard. How have you approached fundraising? How have you gotten better at it and learned how to do it?
I'm not sure I have.
Work in progress.
Oh, it is easier than you think. And I have been so blessed with people who are willing to invest in me without me having to make a big direct ask. And that was certainly true in my city council race. Now I have to be much more directive, and I'm not used to that. I'm a therapist, right? I've been a clinical therapist now for the last 5-6 years. So I'm not used to coming into a conversation with an agenda. This is the most talking that I'll ever do, generally speaking, because I'm a listener. That's what therapists do. So that is taking some pivoting and some adjustment because I'm just so used to taking my cues from the person I'm talking to. And it's hard because I don't want to come off manipulative. So it's been a mental shift for me, and I'm still working through it. It's still hard. And it's hard because a lot of us hate what the money that goes into fundraising goes toward, right? We hate the mailers. We hate seeing the ads on TV, especially ones that are negative. And so I think it's a harder sell than saying, hey, don't you want to donate to ending world hunger or things like that? Even though as a policymaker, we are truly helping inform some of those policies, but it's just a different framing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is harder to sell people on your money is going to go for this many mailers, right? Because are people looking at them? Yes, they are. And you have to do them and it makes a difference in the race, but it's not always the most glamorous thing to buy.
So true.
What inspired you in the first place? You talked about how you tried to get on a border commission, but what did you want to accomplish in city council? Why did you want to be a city council member?
I just wanted to be involved in my community. And having had done a lot of community organizing in other areas, I thought it would be a great way to elevate the issues that I care most about and that I was hearing most. Again, I work at a community mental health center. So my clients tend to be folks who are more on the lower socioeconomic scale and who are very involved with a lot of government systems, whether that's collecting food stamps or they're involved in the justice system or they're involved in child protective services because of their addiction or whatever that might be. And I work a lot with folks who are struggling with housing. I wanted to be able to elevate that conversation specifically around housing. In fact, the board and commission I applied to be on was to be a representative in our housing authority. And a lot of communities have housing authorities that are responsible for really housing those who need voucher support. So maybe they are disabled or they have a lot of limitations on their ability to work or provide for themselves. Housing authorities are in partnership with state and federal and local entities to make sure they're taken care of. And I've been able to do much more than I would have probably on that housing authority because I'm looking at the big picture. Littleton has a budget of about $55 million, and we decide where that money goes. We allocate those resources. And I have loved getting to maybe challenge some of where those resources are going and putting them in areas that are, in my opinion, can be more useful to advancing humankind.
That's great. So when you decided to run for office, you mentioned you had a lot of people who were willing to support you, but how did you build a team? How did you gather people? How did you get advice, support for your run?
Good thing about coming from Washington, D.C. is you can't throw a stone without hitting somebody who's involved in campaigning or politics. So I had a lot of people who I knew who had been involved, and I had been involved, right? I had worked on Barack Obama's campaign. So I engaged them and asked for their ideas and their opinions and used them to start and had some really great advice. And that was more at the high level. And then you really have to build a group of local people who are connected locally, who understand the local issues and who have that collective historical wisdom. And so I was introduced to a lot of those, many of them women actually, who had been past mayors of Littleton. And they were very instrumental in helping me understand the dynamic of what I was getting into and who could offer their advice. And I was very open to learn. One of the first pieces of advice I got was you got to get yourself a young person who can run the campaign. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I was able to find somebody. And this is one of those examples of where, again, I felt very blessed and the stars aligned. He had just graduated college. His major was in math, but he was very interested in politics and he was waiting on security clearance for a job. And so we had all this time where he was just like delivering pizzas. And I met with him and he was not expecting this, but I had just had that conversation with my old boss who was like, get a young person to run the campaign. And I approached him and said, hey, I know you want to be a volunteer, but would you rather be a campaign manager? And we'll give you that title and that'll help you professionally. And he was like, okay. And he did. And that job that he had actually ended up falling through, but he was very excited about politics. And when he was done with my campaign, he ended up working as a legislative aide to the current state representative because he loved it so much. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Getting people who understand things is important, and running with people who that's also a game changer. So I had two other people who were running for city council at the same time I were in different districts. One was the mayor and one was running in another district. I'm at large. You get to know each other really well.
Yeah.
And we had a really good rapport. And so we collaborated a lot and built just good standing meetings every couple of weeks. We would walk together. So neither of us were ever walking alone. I'm knocking doors. And that really helped moving in once we were all elected, because then we already had a bond created and we knew each other's process. And that helped as we were working on ordinances and legislation.
Yeah. That is one of the advantages of the local races is a lot of times you can run with other people because there's more than one position open. So I like how you explain that as a benefit, because it's nice to have people who are on your team and sounding boards and you're in it together.
Exactly.
So did you have any experiences while you were running for office that were kind of faith affirming that you were doing the right thing, that this is what you were supposed to be doing, this is where you were supposed to be?
Oh, I think I go back and forth. I remember that scripture, Doctrine and Covenants, right? Hey, when I told you it was right, just go with that. And remember that feeling that you had, because certainly you're going to doubt. And I think every moment in the campaign, I've had those moments of doubt. Am I really supposed to be doing this? But then I had this like quiet, very soft voice that's kind of like, hey, you're fine. Everything's going to be okay. And to me, that's the faith building part. I think I've seen little tender mercies, to borrow from what Elder Bednar, little tender mercies along the way, supporting me, little things that come through or little moments of doubt that are then followed by a text message of support. And I leaned on people. Again, this was an exercise in faith on my part. And you need others who can remind you that, hey, this is what you wanted. I always also felt that in my patriarchal blessing, it talks a lot about leadership and being a community advocate. And so this just felt like a natural extension of that. So I go back to that and remember that, hey, this makes sense given the template of your patriarchal blessing.
I like how you explain that, where you go back and forth, because when you're doing really hard things, even if you had maybe confirmation at one point, it is easy to second guess that, right? And say, wait,
so
what am I doing? Was this really? And question whether that was real or not. And it's sometimes hard to go back to that initial confirmation and think, yeah, I should be doing this. I should be doing this. And I feel like some people are really good at that. I'm not. So I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Yep. It's me.
So we as a faith don't have a lot of Latter-day Saint women in our church who are running for public office. How do you convince them to do it? What advice would you give to them about running for office and its importance?
First, I think our faith has some of the most talented, smart women that I've ever encountered. And they don't always show up in the professional world. And so I don't think they always get the credit that I certainly have seen. I mentioned earlier, I'm a musician and I've played in different orchestras wherever I've lived. Certainly when I was in DC, we had an LDS like temple orchestra that played at the visitor center and we had concerts. And then out here in Colorado, same thing. And in these orchestras, like 80-90% are women. So when we talk about the talent in our faith, I think of especially women who just want to share their talents, I think is amazing. I also think that because we have so much talent, they're already engaged in their communities in different ways, and they're raising their kiddos and they're active, of course, maybe even in multiple callings. And so I think it's hard to ask folks to do one more thing. I'm a single person without kids. And so I think that has allowed me freedom in a way that maybe other LDS women don't have. That being said, if any women listening doubt your ability to run for office, don't. Okay. Like, you run service projects, you organize potluck dinners and memorial services, and you run primaries. You can do it. I promise you. It is a very similar skill set. And any of you who are returned missionaries, like, you've knocked on doors. You can do that again. It's just in a different capacity. I promise you can totally accomplish this. Just look for the right timing for you and for your family in terms of what your bandwidth is. And I think there's a time and a season. I like that scripture as well, because we're not supposed to do it all at once. And I think do what's right for you, and you'll know it'll fall into your lap.
Absolutely. That's such good advice. One thing we always are talking to women about at Project Elect is the negative side of campaign. And that influences a lot of women's decision to not want to run. They're worried about the negativity. They're worried about the social media posts. They're worried about people coming after them or their families. Have you experienced that in your campaigns, and how have you dealt with it?
I worry about that too, because I think that's what we see. Certainly are the negative ads that are put on television and that target people's personal characteristics. But in my experience, I have not seen it in that way. And I don't know why. And I'm preparing myself for it because most likely now that I'm in a bigger race, that definitely has been the experience of some of my peers. And the more relationships you have built in your community and the people who know you individually, at least this is how I'm looking at it, they're going to be the ones who stand up when they get a piece of mail that has something negative about me. I'm really hoping they'll be the ones who will be able to rip that up and tell their neighbors, hey, that's actually not true. And let's give people more credit, and maybe that they aren't going to believe everything they read or that they see. And let's hold on to the hope. That's what I'm doing. But ask me again come September or October, and I might have a different story. But certainly I'm hope I can bank on the relationships of the people I know who will be the ambassadors for me to stand up and say, hey, that's not accurate.
I really like that. You said one of the reasons why you decided to run was because you didn't feel connected to your community initially. How did running help you connect more to your community? Because it sounds like you're very connected now.
You just start getting invited to a lot of things. And then you have a title after your name. And so one of the things I have always loved doing was just going to different civic groups and listening and hearing what their struggle is, whether it's the local business chamber or it's a group who really wants to improve public safety in their community, or like we've had a school that was closing. And so I was listening to those community members of what they wanted to use the building for. And that part is just so recharging. And I just love getting to see other people who are excited about their community. And then you just start building little connections here and there. And I love being a connector. Malcolm Gladwell talks about that. And I think his book, The Tipping Point, but you can only be a connector if you're connected to a lot of different groups doing different things. And then being able to be meeting with one group that says, hey, we have this need. And then all of a sudden I'm with the Rotary Club and they actually have resources. And I can be like, oh, can I introduce you to so-and-so? Because they just told me that they're in need of those blankets for a group that they're working with refugees or whatever that might be. And that part is incredibly rewarding and exciting. And it just takes a phone call or just a willingness to go to a meeting or listen to a conversation. So many people are organizing in their own communities. And we certainly are notorious for this within our faith community, right? We have so many young women activities and Relief Society activities and campouts, and other churches do too. We don't hold a license to that. Other churches have that. And certainly having done the interfaith work that I did when we were in Washington, D.C., I think helped prepare that. Because if we have those type of civic groups, other organizations do. And it's just a matter of finding them and just being present and being there. 90% is just showing up.
The point about a connector is so true. It's so rewarding to be able to connect people who need help. I have a similar calling now that it sounds like you had in DC, where I go to interfaith stuff and outreach and try and connect people who need service with those who are able to give it. And public service is just such a natural extension of that, because you're working with the public officials, you're working with the local government people, you're working with all the nonprofits in the area. And it's so incredible to see a little slice of what public service can accomplish if it's really approached as service, and as opposed to more of an ego boost, like some politicians. Those are the politicians, the one who do it for ego, right? You're a public servant.
Well, and community service is so uniting too, and that's where I got my start, was in just finding more opportunities for young single LDS people to be involved, because they had a little bit of resources and a lot of time, and finding activities in the community where we could make a difference. And I think that was rewarding to everybody. And that was certainly what was rewarding to me, was just organizing service project after service project. And I still love doing that. Now that I'm a social worker, I will say, because I now get paid to do that work, I find myself a little like doing less of the service projects than I did in the past. And I miss that a little bit. But it's also like I remind myself of there's a season for everything. And there's somebody else who is filling that. And now I just get to show up when I don't have to organize it. They just have already organized it, and I just get to show up, or I just get to bring the rolls or whatever they need for the dinner that they're organizing for the unhoused. And that's been a good reminder. We don't have to do everything all at once. And that's part of the beauty of community, is that you all have a different role to play and you're needed. And God will use us in different ways and at different times in our life based on the needs of our own needs and other people's needs.
We are almost out of time, but I want to transition right into that and ask you, what would you ask or invite women to do in the next little while to take the next step towards public service?
Just educate yourself. Recognize that not every candidate is pigeonholed to whatever their party is. And I think this is what we've been counseled from our pulpit, right? Just do your research. Don't vote exclusively down ballot just for one party. I think it's really important to find out who's running. Go on their websites. If you can't attend their events or hear them speak, just see what they're saying publicly and see where you align, and then go and vote. Colorado is lucky in that we have mail-in ballots. So that gives plenty of time for folks. They get their ballots 2-3 weeks before the election day. And so that gives time. You have your ballot in front of you. You can actually go and research in real time, and paying attention, I think, to your local paper, or just to find out who's speaking or who's doing what and what are they doing. And does that track with you and what's important to you? Do your values match the values of whoever you're electing to represent you? And our local races, of course, a state race is great, but local races really matter too. And I appreciate how you've interviewed a lot of folks on different city councils and things like that, because as soon as you step out of your door, that is a decision that is made by a local elected official. Where you park your car, if you can park your car on the street, if you need a permit to park it, how you're getting your recycling or your trash removal, what your park looks like, and the hours of operation. All of that are local decisions, and that contributes to your quality of life. Local officials are incredibly accessible. You can email us, you can call us, and generally you'll get a call back. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to reach out and just ask. And I have not experienced, at least at the local level, that sort of power hungriness that we tend to identify with politicians. What I've experienced is people who just care deeply about their families and their community, and they just want to make it better.
Yeah, local elected officials are really doing a huge service to their community. They're not getting much glory or money out of it. They're doing it because they want to serve. And you're right. I like the point that you made about them being accessible, because that is a great way to learn more about what's going on in your community, is to just go to the meetings, talk to them. They're very approachable. They want to hear from the people in their community, because that's really their goal, is to help the community be a better place.
And invite them. Say, hey, we're having this gathering or this church activity. Hey, invite them to speak and talk about what's going on locally. Excited to share the cool things that we get to see that not everybody is paying attention to, because some of them are really boring, but they're also really exciting when you're envisioning redoing your downtown or redoing certain parks. That's something everybody, I think, can be like, oh yeah, that is positive. And that is the positive side to government and to politics. It's designed by people who are elected.
I love the idea of inviting them to your church gatherings or events to just give you an update on the community and let you know what's going on. I think that's such a great idea. And it's such a great connection to make between our church community and the elected officials who might not know much about us. And they're always happy to come talk about what they're doing and how they're helping the community. I thank you so much for talking to me. I loved hearing your insights on everything and your approach to things. And I would wish you good luck in your primary, but it sounds like you're good to go. Good luck in November. And it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you for joining me today.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to the Project Elected podcast. For free resources and materials, head over to projectelectwomen.org. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as Project Elect Women. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate us, or give us a review on iTunes. So until next time, thank you.